governance, and it's my my role to visit sites to monitor and make sure that they are keeping, number one, to GCP, and that the studies being coordinated according to the latest approved protocol, and GCP, the documents and the guidelines that are included in GCP are what I will be looking for if I send you a nice email saying, I'd like to come and monitor your site. Okay, so GCP essentials, good clinical practice equals good research practice. Okay, the overview of my presentation today, I've just listed what I'll be covering. So I'll be talking to you about the background of GCP, when does GCP apply, the definitions that are included in GCP guidelines, the principles, so why GCP is a standard that we all need to comply with, investigator responsibilities, so the responsibility of the PI. I'm just touching on informed consent because Rebecca will have covered that last time. Investigational product management often is, they're usually part of the commercial scene where you're actually looking at an experimental drug, but it is important that it can be then transferred to a device or an intervention which may not be part of the commercial sense. Safety reporting is very important, keeping your recruits safe. Essential documents, so they are the documents that I will expect to see at site when I come to monitor. Some resources for you guys that will give you some support where you can go to. So the key learning aims today are, what does GCP actually mean? Increase the awareness of researchers' responsibilities and meet your needs and answer any of your questions. Okay, the background. Okay, so the note for guidance on good clinical practice. So GCP, ICH, is an international accepted standard for the design, conduct, recording and reporting of clinical trials. The TGA comes under the auspices of TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, and I'm sure you've all heard of the TGA. They're part of the Australian Government Department of Health. They are responsible for regulating therapeutic goods, including prescription medicines, vaccines, medical devices, and we use the note for guidance on GCP annotated with TGA comments as one of our Bibles within research. Come on. Clinical trial notification, which, as you know, if you've worked in the commercial area, goes to the TGA for notification, is required. So that is generally for clinical investigational use of any medicine, biological or device that has not been on the register. So it's not got TGA approval for it to be available to the public to treat whatever disease it has been found to be useful for. So that means that any new formulation of an existing product or any new route of administration, it will be considered to be experimental. Also, a marketed medicine, biological or device, beyond the conditions of its marketing approval, including new indications extending the use of the product to a new patient group, and the extension of doses or durations of treatments outside what it's been approved for. But also considered natural therapies, i.e. ginger, probiotics, weight loss shakes, surgical interventions, psychological physiotherapy or speech therapy. So it is right across the board. So GCP guidelines are also applied to other clinical investigations that may have an impact on the safety and well-being of human participants. So really, GCP is really just good research practice. Ideally applies to relevant elements to all research. So a definition of a clinical trial is any investigation in human participants intended to discover or verify the clinical, pharmacological or pharmacodynamic investigations of an investigational product, or to identify any adverse reactions to a product, or to study the metabolism of that product with the objective of ascertaining its safety and its efficacy. So that's potential gain versus the potential risks. And it must at least equal. So the potential benefit must at least equal the potential risk that we're exposing our research participants to. An investigational product is a pharmaceutical form of an active ingredient or placebo being tested or used as reference in a clinical trial, including a product which already has marketing authorization, when it's used or assembled in a way different from what it's been registered for, or when it's used for an unapproved indication. So that is, say for example, osteoporosis. There may be a drug on the market that can treat menopause symptoms, but it may have potential benefits in treating osteoporosis in menopausal women. Because you actually want to give that drug to a group of women that it's not originally approved for, then it will be considered to be experimental, because we don't know what the long-term side effects could be for the participant. Or when used to gain, obviously, further information about an approved use. So the principles of ICH GCP, International Committee for Harmonisation, states in their principles, in their guidelines and statements, that clinical trials should be conducted in accordance with the ethical principles that have their origin in the Declaration of Helsinki, which means that we are keeping to standards that will keep our recruits, their safety and well-being will be number one. Before a trial is initiated, the foreseeable risks and inconvenience should be weighed against the anticipated benefit for the individual. As I just said, it should be at least equal. The rights, safety and well-being of the trial participants are the most important considerations and should prevail over the interests of science and society. The available non-clinical and clinical information on an investigational product should be adequate to support the proposed clinical trial. Clinical trials should be scientifically sound and described in a clear, detailed protocol, which is very important. And now ethics will not consider a project without a clear, concise protocol to which they can review to see whether they're able to ethically approve the study. A trial should be conducted in compliance with the protocol that has received, obviously, previous independent ethics committee approval. Now this is an important one. The medical care given to and medical decisions made on behalf of participants should always be the responsibility of a qualified physician, or when appropriate, of a qualified dentist. Often that may not well apply to us under Metro South, but it is in the statement within the guidelines. Each individual involved in conducting a trial, and this is a big bugbear of mine, should be qualified by education, training and experience to perform his or her respective tasks. And that is why we always ask for a CV of researchers who are going to take an important role within the project. Okay, informed consent. Freely given informed consent should be obtained from every participant prior to clinical trial participation. All clinical trial information should be recorded, handled and stored in a way that allows its accurate reporting, interpretation and verification. The confidentiality of records that could identify participants should be protected, respecting the privacy and confidentiality rules in accordance with the applicable regulatory requirements. As you know, Metro South has its own, we all have our privacy and confidentiality standards that we need to keep to as an employee of Metro South. Every time you go on the computer in the morning to get your results, you'll tick and say, yes, I agree to abide by the rules. Investigational projects should be manufactured, handled and stored in accordance with the applicable good manufacturing practice. They should be used in accordance with your protocol. Systems with procedures that assure the quality of every aspect of the trial should be implemented. Okay, PI's responsibility. Qualifications and agreements. Appropriate qualification, training and experience is a must for the PI. He or she needs to be thoroughly familiar with the use of the intervention, whatever it may be. Maintain a list of appropriate qualified persons to whom they have delegated significant trial-related duties, which is the staff delegation log, which is what I'll be looking for when I come to your site if I monitor. There needs to be adequate resources to run the trial, certainly to meet the recruitment targets, the use of time, staff and facilities, because quite often it is in-kind support, and you often will go into an area within Metro South and use their equipment. So we need to know what resources are going to be used and if there's sufficient funds to cover those uses if necessary. Ensure that all persons assisting are adequately informed about the protocol, the IP, the duties and the functions. So they need to be be familiar with the protocol and what their role within that protocol will be with regard to the participant. The PI communicates with Ethics Committee. It's his responsibility to submit do the submission for ethics approval and to liaise with ethics and also governance, because as you know it's a two-tiered first ethics committee approval or ethics approval and then governance approval, because you will want to run your study within Metro South auspices. And also, obviously, he needs to comply with the protocol. So informed consent is an HREC approved form. Document control is incredibly important, because sometimes if a trial is one that runs maybe for a couple of years, there may be changes to the informed consent, the information which we give our recipients, or our participants, should I say. There could be side effects. New side effects are often added to the protocol, so therefore it needs to be reflected in the PRCF, so that the new participant coming along can read that information and decide whether they want to be in the study or not. The signatures. All signatures need to be personally dated. It needs to be in everybody's handwriting, the participant, the researcher, and a witness if a witness is needed. A copy must always go to the participant. Also, these days now we have IEMR, then a copy of that information consent signed document will need to be uploaded into IEMR, but the original is always kept at site, and that is what I'll be looking for when I come out to monitor. Okay, the IP, I won't dwell too much on. A lot of this is repeated, so this is really telling you about how, if it's a drug, how it should be processed according to quality standards. You know how sometimes there's in the newspapers where they've had to close down companies that actually produce the drugs or the interventions for drug companies. They've been found to not maintain a standard to which they need to be kept to be safe. Then all that has to be taken into consideration: the batching, the labelling, the expiry dates, the way that drugs are, once they're finished with, they're destroyed, they have to be destroyed according to a standard. You can't just chuck them down the toilet. So that is all part of GCP too, it's included. And the storage, obviously. And of course, if a drug is part of a trial, then generally a pharmacist, a qualified pharmacist who has a knowledge of the drug will be delegated to actually dispense and collect the drug and monitor the participant if there are any side effects. Okay, let's just skip to the next one. So safety reporting. So compliance with safety is really important, and that's a big issue for me, to make sure that if there's a standard risk, so there are risks that when we expose our participants to, that they are reported. and that the participants are managed safely, because their safety, again, and well-being is number one. So an adverse event is any untoward medical occurrence in a patient or clinical investigation participant. It is reported according to the protocol requirements. So generally, safety reporting generally should be in the protocol. What do we do if a patient has an unexpected side effect to whatever intervention we're testing? Serious adverse event is any untoward medical occurrence that results in death, is life-threatening, requires inpatient hospitalisation or prolongation of hospitalisation, results in persistent or significant disability or incapacity, or in maternity, there's a congenital abnormality or birth defect. And in that case, what we would do, we would follow up the baby. Follow up mum, even if she's finished participating. So she gets pregnant during the study, then we follow up her and the baby, and we don't archive it. It goes on. Children, we continually monitor, because we don't know what might happen long term when they're grown up. Report SAEs immediately to the sponsor. Comply with regulatory. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I was just going to say with that last one there, so the reporting to HREC, of course, that's changed.
It's changed, as I said. I'm not, because we're only. It's not. Yeah. It's it's in process.
Yes.
I haven't, but there are changes in the pipeline where SAEs, the processing of SAEs has changed, yeah. But at the moment it's still under consideration.
We don't want them.
We don't. Okay, essential documents. So the staff delegation log, as I've already covered, and trial master file, which I'll show you quickly shortly. Participant logs. This is really to confirm that, number one, your patients exist, because we have had a lot of fraud in the past, and also we can track what has happened to them. So say we've got a randomised double-blind project where nobody knows who gets the activity, who gets the placebo, and then we have a patient who becomes very ill and is hospitalised. We have a code so that we can then marry up. We can go back and look to see what the patient's been given, so that then we can treat them accordingly. Document control, consent form protocol. Also, please just keep one copy of superseded versions in the folder and clearly mark them that they're superseded, because when I go out to site, often I've got voluminous documents because 2 or 3 of the same document has been filed because you think I might need it. And it provides you with a huge file folder which is difficult to manage and also takes me twice as long. So, GCP specifies requirements for PICS protocols, and they are located in section 6 of the GCP guidelines. Okay, this is just what I'll be looking for in your trial master file, and it can be electronic or it can be hard copy. I don't care as long as you've got it there and I can access it. So the protocol, current or superseded, the patient information, of course, case report forms. So quite often in academic trials we are collecting data. So, patients filling questionnaires, you actually extract data from a database. I need to see the case report forms that you will be using, or your researchers, your colleagues will be using. And obviously, ethics approvals and correspondence, ethics approval letters, the Safe for Governance should be there. That there's sufficient funding and finance, so I need to see those documents. Again, the IP, if there is one, the information with regard to that. The randomisation and unblinding, which I've just spoke to. Quality assurance is standard operating procedures, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We all need SOPs so that we get consistency across the board. Data management procedures, so that's the actual processing of the data that you'll be collecting. Adverse events, as I've talked about, the statistical analysis and the plan and the analysis of the data once you've collected it, or the information you've collected, any correspondence, general or miscellaneous. This is just a sample of the signature log and delegation of duties for those who are not familiar. So it's quite clear when I look at your the signature log who is responsible for what, so what role they are performing. Okay, resources. So there are resources with regard to GCP. There are web-based training, ARCs, and there are 2-day courses also available for GCP. The national framework, that's the NHMRC National Statement of Ethical Conduct, is we work with that. It is located in our folders, and that's what we adhere to as well, along with the ICH GCP. Okay, I think that's it. So GCP is essentially good practice with regard to research, design, conduct and record keeping. Are there any questions, any comments? Thank you for all your time and interest, and thanks to Cindy Hall in cardiology research for some of her input. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, I hope I haven't gone on. There is a lot of information, and quite often, you know, I go to sites and they say, but this is not, it's not a commercial study, we don't need to keep the GCP. But if you've got human volunteers that are participating and you're exposing them to a new intervention like physiotherapy, and it's something that's not standard, then you should be keeping to GCP to keep them safe so they don't get injured. Okay.
Thank you.
You alright? You all sleep?
No, I learned a lot.
You learned a lot.
Yes. Very useful.
But if you need any help with GCP, just give us a shout, and I can forward you the guidelines so you've got them there.
And this will all be on our website, which I'll send a link out to, so you can refresh yourselves at different times on the subject matter. So
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
All right, then, girls, thank you very much for your time. Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please